You ever drive by a house and you're like, ooh, that's got creepy vibes, or this is a spooky house, right? Well, that's you tuning in through empathy to feel that. That's the clairsentience. I think the clairsentience thing is a beautiful first step into developing further. So, like, if you haven't really tried any kind of practices in psychic development, starting with clairsentience is usually a pretty natural state for most people to go to, because I feel honestly that every single person is psychic. I feel that we are all born with this ability. And I feel that empath is like the ability to feel other people's emotions, right? Is a psychic ability.
That's defined empath. Because people like me, I never consider myself to be an empath, but maybe I am. I don't know.
Oh yeah, you are.
Like seriously. Okay. Okay, cool. Thanks. Thanks for telling me in my face. But see, like for the last like 30 something years, I never considered myself to be an empath. I really never did. I thought, quote unquote, the stereotype of empath is like, scared of people, like, or scared of being big crowds, like just always not like emotionally stable in a sense,
Mhm.
and things like that, such
Mhm.
things like that. So if we can, or if can you give us a more clearer definition of what a true empath?
Yeah. What that means is that you're capable of putting yourself in someone else's shoes and feeling what they feel, right? Sometimes this is intentional and other times it just happens naturally. So, true psychic ability can come through that naturalness of just no boundaries, no borders. I just care. I have compassion for you, right? And so, just by being a loving, caring person, using your heart energy, you're an empath. Okay. So you see someone who's in stress, you feel for them, right? And sometimes you literally will feel what they're feeling in your body. So that's what was happening to me. And I didn't know, I didn't realize it. I instead felt like I had social anxiety. In fact, I was diagnosed with social anxiety disorder because I said when I'm around a lot of people, I get very nervous, I get tense, I get headaches, I feel suffocating. Like it's overwhelming sometimes when I'm around too many people. Like more than like 5 people, I'm like, ugh, like it's just too much for me. So my doctor was like, oh, social anxiety disorder, like without ever really going deeper into that. Right. Which, I get it. That's mental health. That's what they're trained for. But what it really was an energetic exchange, right? And I didn't realize it. So when I met a psychic on my 40th birthday and she told me, hey, do you know you're an intuitive empath and you're basically just wide open? This is why you have such a hard time maintaining yourself around people. This is why you get panic attacks. This is why you will say strange things. You don't understand why you say them. Like all this strange stuff is happening because you absolutely have no boundaries between you and other people. And so empaths are basically very open like that, right? So that they don't close themselves off from others, right? Now, you can still close yourself off and be consciously aware of how someone's feeling. And that's still an empath thing. But what I'm referring to is people who do this naturally without consciousness, without awareness, right? That they
Taking it on without having that healthy separation.
Right. Right.
Right.
Healthy is a key word there. Right.
Yes.
So that's where I had to learn. Like when she told me this, I was like, oh, tell me more because I need to understand, like, can I function like as a normal person, like in society then if I know these things, right? And not feel like a weirdo, not feel like I have to always be on guard. Right. And yeah, absolutely. So some basic things that we learned, but essentially what you're doing as an empath is you are feeling exactly what that other person's feeling and it feels just like it's yours, right? So
Mhm.
especially if you feel there's a little boundary, a little line between empathy and sympathy. Okay, it's a really, really fine line between those two. And sympathy is, you're feeling sorry for someone because of the state that they're in, right? Like, oh, my heart goes out to you, I have sympathy for you. But empathy is like, that's also happening to me.
Right.
Okay? There's the difference. So you want to be careful on that line sometimes where, if you're making that also happening to you, that's where you can't always have clarity, right? And you're wound up in their emotions, and sometimes that turns into panic attacks and all that. So like in crowds, that's usually what you're doing, is you're tuning into several people at once who are having anxious thoughts, are feeling tension, stuff like that. Not to mention the spiritual activity out there. Okay. All the spirits doing their things, right? So you're just tuning into all of that without being conscious of it. And so you might feel extremely drained after an interaction with someone, or being around crowds or something like that, or even in a place. Places will also hold energy like that can drain you, right? So, if you ever drive by a house and you're like, ooh, that's got creepy vibes, or this is a spooky house, right? Well, that's you tuning in through empathy to feel that. That's the clairsentience.
And I took that little quiz and I was like, oh my gosh, I was so shocked. I was like, what? There's a little quiz I can sort of see one of my clear abilities is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and then from that I found out I'm clairsentience. I'm like, wait, what? That was a shocker this morning.
Really?
So,
Okay.
because a lot of questions, whenever I answered, I was like, I don't generally remember how people look,
Mm-hmm.
but I remember what kind of feeling they gave me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like the vibe that they gave me, the attitude, the tone, like that's the impression that carves the most deepest in me, I guess, put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll be like, okay, I don't like you, or I like you. So
I find that for like, if we're talking like first impressions when we're tuning into abilities, I've found that I'm usually wrong in my first impressions because I'm generally so guarded and just like careful, I guess, and very cautious and closed off, that like when I meet certain people at first, I'm like, I don't like them. But then they end up being like some of the best people that I've ever met.
I kind of used to be the same way. I felt like I was too open. Like where you said you were closed off, I was too open, and I was too naive, really, and thought everybody was like me. Everybody had good intentions. Everybody was
Right.
kind. People were good. I was very naive when I was picking up on energies. Yeah.
That was my younger years.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
I was then after my teenage years, then everything shifted.
Gotcha. Yeah, see it shifted way too late for me. It really shifted in my 30s, where I was finally like, hold on, like I can't just assume everybody is good, because then they show me they're not, and it's like again and again and again, to the point where like I don't know if I can trust my first instincts with people, because I assume they're going to be good, kind-hearted people, right? So after a while, that's where I kind of put this boundary up and has sort of shut myself into this sort of detached, just survival mode, if you will, until my 40s, where then it started to become more obvious that I was picking up on other people's energies and feeling them. And that's where I started to tune in intuitively to the vibes, like what Tiffany's talking about, like feeling that energy around them and just knowing from that whether or not, they're someone I want to be around, or if they're just like in a bad mood,
excuse me.
stuff like that would pop up. And it just became more and more evident the more I practiced mindfulness and presentness. So yeah, I think that's a natural occurrence really for anyone who's just kind of slowing down, and paying attention, paying attention to that, like, oh, I got a bad vibe from that, or whatever, raising awareness, but that's like, I think the clairsentience thing is a beautiful first step into developing further. So like, if you haven't really tried any kind of practices in psychic development, starting with clairsentience is usually a pretty natural state for most people to go to, because I feel honestly that every single person is psychic. I feel that we are all born with this ability. And I feel that it's empath is like the ability to feel other people's emotions, right? Is a psychic ability. And a lot of people are aware that they are empaths. They are aware they can feel people's emotions, but then they're stuck and they don't know what to do. Right. So that's why I started first with a workshop for empaths specifically on psychic protection and development, so that they wouldn't have to feel so powerless or against it. That's actually what motivated me, was my own personal experience with it, and not knowing that I was a psychic, not knowing that I was picking up on people's energies. I just felt drained by people, and I knew that it was people, right? But I didn't know anything more than that, right? So I'd go to work, and I worked in social services, and so I was around a lot of people all day, right? And I worked at a food bank, and so dealing with people, who are in dire situations, or that type of stuff. So it's lower energy, right? Emotional energy. And so I would come home at the end of the day, and I would just flop on my bed because I was exhausted from giving out all this emotional energy to try and make people feel better, right? To ease their
Mhm.
suffering and all that stuff. And I didn't realize that is actually a psychic ability that many of us are doing, and we have no clue, right? And then we don't know that we need to fill ourselves back up. We just feel like, I just need to not people for a while, and so we go and close ourselves off, right? So it's a natural instinct to give ourselves that space when we're overwhelmed. But if you understood it, you could do this every single day and not be drained, not feel like you're losing yourself at all. And in fact, you could turn into what I call a transmuter. And what I mean by that is, somebody comes in and maybe they're in a depressed state, maybe they're grieving or something like that, and you talk with them and you tune into them, you feel their energies, right? And you can start to use that to tune into their guidance, right? You transmute that energy for them instead of draining yourself and giving all your heart energy to them, right? So that you're like, ugh, afterwards. No, instead you're energized because you were just the conduit to allow that healing to come through, right? For them to transmute that energy from negative to positive. And so they leave feeling good and uplifted, and so do you. You're not drained. So some really basic things is what I like to teach in my psychic one-on-one mentorship or in my classes, is so that you don't get drained every day, that you don't fear being in crowds. It's okay for you to be around people, to go to parties, to do things like that, and not feel like you're going to lose yourself. So the clairsentience's ability, it can be defined in two different ways, and it kind of depends on who you're talking to. But because I've done a lot of reading on this topic, but the clairsentience can mean that you clearly feel the emotions of other people, like I'm talking about here. And
Mhm.
other times you can clearly feel in your physical body what that other person is feeling, right? So that, say they have maybe they have high blood pressure, and maybe you're starting to feel that, like the tightness in the chest, or or the pounding in the ears or something like that, like symptoms that say that you have that can occur as well. And that actually used to happen to me more often than I realized, because I actually thought I was suffering from like ailments and like fibromyalgia, all this stuff. Turned out to be like the other people I was working with, right? I was picking up their symptoms. I was feeling what they were feeling literally in my body.
Mhm.
But also the emotions, when you get very in tune, you start paying attention through meditation's the best tool for this, but through that mindfulness awareness of your body, you can actually feel the chemical process happening when you're feeling that other person's emotion. It's very interesting, right?
Mhm.
I was not conscious of this for a very long time until I started to do these meditative practices, learning about psychic abilities, and then I could literally feel how the chemicals were being produced when someone was in fear. I could feel it in my gut. I could feel that energy just being drained down to my gut, right? Like I was in fear. And that was a big clue to me, because it was like, well, hold on. I know personally I'm not in fear because I am aware of myself. I'm totally aware of what's going on with me emotionally, right? Mentally, all that stuff. So when I get this body response, that's a real big indicator this is someone else's emotion, right? So the best way to tell really is to be fully aware of yourself.
Mhm.
Really, it's you got to be in tune with yourself, which boils down to meditation, mindfulness, right? So that's why one of the first things I require all my students, you've got to get into mindfulness practice every single day. 5 to 10 minutes of mindfulness meditation will increase your psychic abilities like no other thing, because it
Mhm.
just helps you to be present. And that's really, really important when you're doing psychic readings and you're trying to get accurate information. I kind of rattled off, but hopefully that explained what an empath was. Do you have any more questions? Was that clear?
No, I get it. I mean, thank you for like explain it to me, because it's a very confusing topic. It
Mm.
is, at least in my opinion. And it's also a very mysterious kind of topic that,
Mhm.
you know, there's
Mm.
confusion, there's mystery, there's myths, there's, you
Yeah.
know, it's not a very transparent side of the
Well, I
human world,
think
I guess, because we're in this like dense dimension where we're so used to seeing things just through our physical eyes
Yeah.
that we're not aware of what's outside our physical body. Well, in
Mhm.
a sense, sometimes we are not even aware what's inside our physical body,
Right.
actually.
Right.
So, yeah.
when I was 6 and I first started, so like, you know, in public schools here, you know, the kindergartners are always kind of sequestered. So you're not like in the main school with all of the other kids. Like you're still very much in your classroom. And so
Yeah.
it's like a smaller, more intimate surrounding. And so at the time that I turned 6 and went into first grade, that's when I thought the social anxiety started.
Mm.
And it was always at lunchtime. And that's because that would be all of the kids in one big room all together.
Yeah.
And I would immediately just have like all of that energy all together. I would just have this feeling, right? And there was no escaping it. And then once I was out of there, it was fine.
Mm-hmm.
But just being in, even though it was, you know, a big cafeteria, it was like everything is heightened. The smells, the sounds, and it's just like everything is closing in on you.
Yes. Yes.
And I felt that way every time we went to a restaurant.
Mm.
And my body's way of getting me out of that was to get physically sick.
Mm-hmm.
And so as soon as that would happen, it's like it would release the energy and I was fine. Back to normal. And this was my whole life, to the point where even the thought of having to go places, because like I never knew what was going to trigger this. I never knew what was going to happen. I would just be put in this position. And so like the thought of actually like going on vacation with people that were not my family, like that would never happen. Like I would have never done that. You know, it got to the point where I didn't even want to like go and do like normal things.
Yeah.
Like, and as I got older, it got worse. Like that sensation got worse. And I remember being at like a pediatrician appointment. Like I told her about this, like I get really anxious, and they were just like, you just have to figure out a way to deal with it. And I was like, okay. So I did, you know, in between. But it wasn't until I was in my 30s and I learned that that wasn't my energy that I was feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not long after I learned how to ground and center my energy that I was at a destruction derby, and I was sitting in like, I was in the stands. I was up in the big stands in the grandstand, and then I was in like the front row. And so I had all these people that were having to walk by to get to their seats. And I was feeling all of the energy. And so I was starting to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I was starting to shut down. And so I just really focused on grounding and shielding my energy. And at the point that I did that, it stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to keep it. And I was able to feel that barrier kind of around me, like an egg or
Like eggshell. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like to me too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an egg for me.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm onto something here.
Mm-hmm.
And so later, I think it was within like the next couple weeks or next month, we had gone to a dinner thing at a newer restaurant in town, and it was an outside seating event, but there was like a ton of people. I mean, it was packed. And again, I started to feel a little bit, you know, off, and I was starting to feel all of that. Everything was starting to kind of come in, and I was feeling all the energy and the noise and the sensations. And again, I grounded my energy and I centered myself and I shielded, and I pushed it out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okay, there's definitely something to this.
Right.
And so the more I learned how to do that, and just being aware in general that that's not my energy that I was feeling. That was everybody else's all together. And it was just all pressing in on me.
Yeah.
And once I was able to separate myself from that, like I think I've maybe only had maybe 1 or 2 episodes in years since then.
Good.
I mean, it was absolutely life-changing
Yeah.
learning those tools and being able to actually understand how they applied, because I've never been able to really explain it to anybody. No one's ever really understood
Right.
that sensation if you don't live it.
Right. Right. Well, some of us are a little more sensitive than others to it. You know, and a lot of the times I think, like parents who don't know, right? They don't know how to help you with that. Or they don't understand it or anything like that. Or sometimes they're clueless, right? And like with my parents, they just kept saying, oh, she's just sensitive. She's got a wild imagination, you know, like she's dramatic, you know, like that. I was always labeled all these things. And so when I discovered this stuff and I kind of got control of this, and now I'm like, I could be in a huge crowd and I'm perfectly okay. Like I am not going to lose myself. I'm not going to get crazy. I'm not going to be drained. None of that now. So I feel like honestly, I was just misunderstood. Like they didn't get it. And if I were given these tools earlier on in my life, I wouldn't have had such wild experiences. Like I've had panic attacks. Like I had to have my husband come and pull me out of a busy mall one time because I could barely walk with all the energy I was holding. It was Christmas time. It was a stupid idea for me to go into a big mall. It was a big mall too. It was in Sacramento, so it was just full
Oh
of
dear.
people. It was like 3 stories or something like that. So I was just like, you know, and I barely was able to call him. I'm like, help me, you know, because I just was so shaken up from all that energy. And it was maybe a couple of years after that when I discovered, oh, okay, empaths, this is what's going on, you know, when of course the doctors are like, oh, it's social anxiety, here, take a pill, you know, and it's like, that didn't work. Okay. And I need help still, right? But I just kind of just avoided people. That was my strategy, was just say no, don't go out in big places, you know, like limit my time with others, you know, who's not, I don't feel comfortable with or whatever, or don't know. And that was a very small group of people. So, but nowadays, I mean, you guys know, I go out there, I'll talk in front of a group of people and I don't have a problem at all. So it definitely made a huge, huge impact in my life. Learning about some real basic things, you know, like learning about energy, learning about how to use my mind to center myself, to ground myself, to shield, right? And this isn't to, you know, block off other people. Some people are worried about that. Like, well, if I do that, I won't feel. I actually had one student who didn't want to shield because she felt like that would limit her psychic abilities. And I said, well, no, when you're in a reading, you don't want to shield. Okay. Because you just want to keep up an awareness so that you don't lose yourself. Right. Because you still want to be able to feel those person's emotions. You still want to connect with them and link with them, but you don't want to be drained from it. Right. So having the basic awareness and putting that eggshell up is a wonderful way to keep your own energy and still help those people, and not just, you don't lose yourself in this process, and you're not needing a weekend off, you know, after the conversation, you know, which is what happened to me so frequently. I mean, I just honestly, at the end of the workday, I was so exhausted. I had no energy really to do anything for anybody else, you know, people. I couldn't people at all after that. Know? And the weekends I just spent basically in my bed reading books, so I didn't have to deal with anybody. And that was just no way to live, you know? So that to me was a big turning point, learning about what that means to be an empath and what do you do with that? You know, how do you live as an empath and still, you know, be productive in this world and not have to sequester yourself away from people, you know? And I think
See,
that's a big problem for a lot of people.
see, I don't have experiences like you two have during the childhood period.
Hmm.
Not that I remember of. I've always been more of an introvert kind of person. I've always kind of stay within, I guess, my circle a little bit, and also since I moved a lot whenever I was a kid and constantly changing environment, um, I didn't have problem going out crowds. I grew up in Taiwan. Night market was the biggest thing. Those were crowded, by the way.
Yeah, I bet.
just like malls and all that stuff. And I have no problem walking through those
Mhm.
without getting into like some sort of physical or mental or even emotional kind of reaction.
Mhm.
The problem right now I'm having is I'm being way too close to my family.
Ah.
So family members, I never thought that family members could be a big deal too
Mm.
whenever it comes to like like empathy kind of abilities, or like, because I'm not drained whenever I'm going outside. I'm more drained whenever I'm home.
So you've got good boundaries with the public, but no boundaries with your family.
Yeah, so that's the issue I'm running into right now, and that's kind of the realization I'm finally having, is that I'm being way too open for my family, to the point where I'm just letting them picking my bones off, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so there's people like me. There's, currently I'm a stay-at-home mom, as both of you know,
Mm-hmm.
that I can't run away. I mean, I live in this house 24/7. It's like I am spending way much more time in this house and this family. And now it's kind of crushing me. And I'm sure there's people out there who are in the same situation.
Mm-hmm.
What should we do
Mm-hmm.
if the person is our family?
Yeah. Well, that's where the first thing is becoming aware that you have this. Okay. So you're already on the first step, right? You're
Cool.
aware, oh, they're draining me. Yeah, there's too much. Okay. So that's the first step, because most people, they're not really aware. They're just like, oh, it's my family. But no, like there's
Right.
an energy exchange happening.
There
Right.
is.
Like, if do they feel better after your conversation and you feel worse? Well, then yeah. Excuse me. My throat chakra needs
Oh,
clearing.
you're picking me up, because
Yeah.
I've been fighting a
Do
cold.
you have, or no, no, do you have a blocked throat chakra? Because I might be picking up on that.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, with my shoulders and stuff, so
yeah, and
probably,
with your
most likely.
family, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
so that shows up all the time for me. By the way, when I'm doing readings and I start to do that, it's usually an indication that throat chakra needs clearing.
I've
um,
got something to say.
so yeah, I'll give you some exercises, okay? But
Okay, cool.
but yeah, when it comes to your family, what I would do is really to be very discerning about what's going on in that situation, which meditation is going to help you with this, okay? And that's going to be harder with family, I know, because we don't want to close them off, and we care for them more, and so it's easier to lose ourselves. But that's where you need to become more aware of yourself, okay? So it's on you to become aware of your emotional state, your vibrational state, right? What you are giving out, and whether or not you're able to take on that, right? And that's where it's got to make a tough decision sometimes, where you got to say, well, is it going to hurt me more to help this person, right? Or is it going to hurt them more if I don't help them? Right. And kind of weighing that out, because really you got to know at the end of the day, you got to know that you're okay with you, right? And that you haven't compromised yourself, you haven't hurt yourself, or, just given way too much sacrificing to your family, right? Which happens again and again and again. I see it all the time, especially with women, mothers. It's just this natural thing that we kind of we put ourselves on the way back burner, right? We're not that important. But the thing is that when we do that, we realize later on, almost too late, that we've lost ourselves. We don't even know who we are anymore. Right. So I get so many women who are like in their 40s, especially when their kids are a little bit older and more independent and stuff. And they're like, well, now that I have all this free time, I don't even know who I am. Like I was always just mom, and just
Mhm.
putting out fires all the time, or taking people to appointments or whatever, right? And so that is a natural occurrence, I think, with moms, but also it just happens with empaths because they make everybody else more important, right? And so they don't give themselves enough importance in their own life, right? So I recommend that you constantly check in with yourself to see, like, how am I feeling about this? Am I going to compromise myself? Am I going to be sacrificing myself? Right? Does this hurt me to do this? Right? And it's really hard to say no. I know that. I know it's hard to say no to family, especially if you see someone suffering, but there are times where you have to kind of get that discernment in place and say, if I help this person, am I actually enabling this behavior to continue? Right? Which is usually that's the line that needs to be crossed. Because if you are enabling that person by giving your support or whatever, your energy, your time, your attention to continue in bad behavior, to continue in things that will continue to hurt them or you, then really you're not doing any good for anybody. Right?
No, because you're telling them that it's okay and it's just
Yeah.
going to continue to happen.
Right. So you've got to train people how to treat you. Right. And so this is an important thing for everybody, not just psychic practitioners, but everybody has to understand that, those who are with you are going to need you at times. Right. But if you train them that you're always available and that you're not important to yourself, then they get used to that and they take you for granted. Right. And then before you know it, you're feeling like nobody listens to me. I don't get my needs met. You get blocked throat chakras, you get thyroid issues, which is in the throat. Okay. So it's a indication that you are not speaking up for yourself. You're not being enough for yourself, not presenting yourself, right?
Mhm.
Or you're not being authentic, possibly. So those issues, what I would do is to take a lot of time to go very internal, to spend time within yourself, checking in with yourself every single day. Okay, how am I doing? How am I feeling? Right? If I'm feeling a little off today, well, then I probably should say no if, mom asked me to do this, or, husband asked me to do that, or, whatever, right? Or maybe I'll give a little bit of time to this task, but then I'm going to give some back to me, right? Just where you're just more and more conscious of your role in this, your part in this. Okay. So I want you to think of it just like when you're on an airplane and they tell you, put on your own oxygen mask first, right? Because if you don't do this, you will not be alive to help your loved one. So this is in a sense the same thing, right? You're putting on your own oxygen mask by taking this time to check in with yourself and ask these honest questions, like, do I have it within me today to deal with this or handle this? Or if this should come up, what would I say? Or, so-and-so keeps doing this, and I got to change this pattern. So I got to become more conscious or aware, right? All that stuff is internal work that's on you. And really nobody else can do that for you. But the more consciousness you put on this, the better you're going to get at it. Okay. And then sooner or later, you kind of just do it naturally. So it's not so, you don't always leave yourself open all the time and vulnerable all the time. But it's not also that you're closed off. It's just, it makes you aware. Right. So like the whole idea where Ali's talking about the eggshell feeling, right, is the grounding, the centering, the shielding, the stuff that I teach. Well, the whole idea of that really isn't to block their energies. It's more so to make you aware of theirs and yours, right? Where that separation is. Because otherwise you will lose yourself in their emotions and their confusion, and it will just turn into a mess. Right. So that's what happens with arguments and disagreements and stuff like that, is that we lose those boundaries, right? We lose that sense of that person's thinking this way, feeling that way, right? I'm thinking this way, feeling that way. And so there's this blending of energies that can create this confusion, right? And I've had that happen in psychic readings too, where I've perhaps let my boundaries down a little too much because I had too much sympathy for them, too much empathy, kind of went overboard. And then I was in a state of confusion. I couldn't get clarity anymore. And then it was like, oh, hold on. I got to reground. I got to keep this eggshell up, right? Get myself back in my space. Now that I feel okay, right? Then I can be there for you, fully present, fully aware. So putting on my mask basically so I could breathe. So now I can be present with you, right? And not lose myself. So I hope that makes sense. I know there's no like tricks or anything I can give you other than envisioning the shield around you as a way to just kind of separate visually your energy from theirs. And of course you can use the eggshell if that looks good for you, if you like that, or you can come up with whatever you like, a bubble, something like that. Sometimes I imagine Lip Bubble from like Glinda the Good Witch and Wizard of Oz. So I kind of like see myself in that, you know. But it really kind of just depends on my environment, who am I around, stuff like that. But there's always a sense of protection with that. And you can also reinforce that by calling light to it and just imagining holy light coming through and just washing everything in your aura away that's not yours. It's a beautiful visualization to do every day, maybe a couple times a day. Because if you're around your family a lot and you're giving out all this emotional energy, you're probably holding on to theirs. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's a way to visualize that and to reinforce into your psyche. I am removing their energy. I am restoring my own, right? And then getting a visualization of grounding your energy into the earth to give you back this feeling of being in the earth, right? Being physical again. So that could be in the form of you imagining roots coming down and you're getting deep into the earth. Or you can imagine maybe you got a grounding cord that's tied to the back of your tailbone and it goes down to the center of the earth. Or, other people have other ideas of grounding, but any visualization like that assists you to bring your energy back into the present, into the here and now, is beneficial. So I encourage you to play around with it and use your imagination and come up with some ideas that make you feel safe and grounded.
The other thing, Tiffany, I can say from experience, because I am that person for my family, and it extends outside of my, immediate household, and it's a bigger kind of a nucleus, where I'm that person for every problem. I get tagged in for, fixing things, for finding things, for needing things, for handling things, whatever it is. It ends up being me, and it's not a complaint. But I've had to learn that you have to find ways to refill your cup. So even though you're a stay-at-home mom in your home, you still need to find things outside of that and that's a part of self-care. And you have to consider not feeling guilty for taking that time to have that self-care. So like, for example, even being in this Q&A, that's a version of self-care for me.
Yeah.
Going to classes, learning about these things that I was interested in, was me taking time from the family. And by me investing in my own self-care, it was allowing me to care for them even more, because it was refilling that cup. And so having some healthy separation, whether it's maybe you go and get a pedicure, maybe you go and take an Epsom salt bath, maybe you go and read a book outside for 20 minutes, whatever that is that you can do just for yourself, something that you enjoy, will put you in a better place to kind of handle all of those other things.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important that we not feel guilty for taking that time, but understand that it also, not only is it helping you, but it will help them eventually.
Yeah, because if you think of it this way, you are giving them the worst version of you if you don't give yourself self-care. You want to give them the best version of you. So that requires self-care. And I didn't really get into the practice of this until I actually became professional, because then it was requirement. Like I needed to make sure I was okay, right? I had self-care, or else I couldn't tune in. So it taught me the requirement basically of getting through my life of taking care of me, making sure I didn't keep putting myself last, right? And that is a huge boost to your confidence, your self-esteem, right? That, oh, I'm just as important, right? And in fact, if I don't give the best version of me, I don't get the best to them, right? And I want to give the best to them, right? So that's your motivation. Okay, how do I serve them the best? How do I give the best of me? Well, then that means I got to get myself prepared. I got to take care of myself emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically, right? I got to make sure that I'm giving back to myself so that I can be fully present for my family, for my client, whatever, right? So it really, I see absolutely no reason to be guilty over that. Instead, I would feel guilty for not giving the best of myself.
I had to be very intentional, because I had a couple of things scheduled during my week. And those were just kind of like my routine things that I had reoccurring for a period of time. And if I added anything more to that, sometimes there would be like, oh, well, you had this on this day and you had this on this day, and now you're doing this. And it's like, yes, because I need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, there was a little bit of a pushback and a bit of a struggle to get others to kind of understand. But eventually, it did get better, where it was, no, I'm doing this because I need to. So I think that's kind of a natural occurrence when something kind of different happens. For those on the other side of it to not fully have that understanding at first, but just stay true to those intentions.
I am really impressed with both of you, and I'm definitely impressed with Ellie. I don't know how you deal with all the family problems, because I get really annoyed. I mean, I don't know if you ever feel annoyed, but I get really annoyed, and it's only like 3 kids and like 2 adults for me. But you got like the extended family part too.
I
So
get annoyed. I get annoyed, and I don't keep it all together all the time.
Like, there's times where I'm like, you are an independent individual. Figure it out yourself. That's really what I want to tell them. Let's like, come on. It's like, you can do this. Why?
Mhm.
It's like,
I
I'm
have
not your
been
problem solver.
I've been very vocal lately with even telling others, like, that's not your problem to fix. These other individuals are adults, and sometimes we learn by making mistakes. That's how people learn. That's how people grow. And, you know, just kind of putting those ideas back out there that, not everything is yours to fix. That's a true thing. And,
Mhm.
yeah, if you can step in and try to make something less painful, great. But again, people, I know I learned from my mistakes. That's how it worked for me. They're not necessarily bad. They can be great learning opportunities. And so, no, I do get annoyed. It's not, I don't have this down to a perfect anything,
Yeah.
but I've
It's
at
just
least
part of being
learned how to,
human, you know?
yeah, I've kind of learned how to regroup though. And when something is bothering me, then I'm able to kind of take a step back and kind of assess why.
Yes.
Why is it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Is it
Right.
just an accumulation of everything? Okay, then I need to do something separate and do something different for me and then regroup. And then it's not as irritating. Or I have my people that I vent to.
If anybody out there is needing some guidance or has some struggling with some issues like what we were talking about tonight, or what that means with being an empath or any of those things, I encourage you all to go check out the website laughinggypsy.com. I'll put a link in the description. Allie and Tiffany are readers there with me, so all three of us are available to be with you to help you. So I encourage you to reach out to us and let us help you and get started on your journey today.